I'm Mia from Anxious Girl Knits. This is my first full tutorial on how to make a garment. This is going to be for my bi-colour scarf. It's a perfect textured, beginner-friendly first knit. Let's start by talking about the yarn. This is a chunky merino wool. There's 100 grams per ball with 65 metres within. This is the yarn in the scarf kits that are available on my website. You'll need 2 balls of each colour, 4 balls in total. You can also sub this for any other chunky yarn, just with a bit of maths. Check the recommended gauge on the label. This scarf is going to be 25 cm wide. If your gauge says 10 cm is 12 stitches, for example, then you need to times 12 by 2.5, so you can see how many stitches you need to make 25 cm. If this is your first knit, I would recommend using straight needles. Straight needles are the ones that you first think of when you think of knitting. I don't actually have any 10mm straight needles, but these are 15mm, just so you can see what straight needles look like. These are circular needles. This is what I'm going to be using during this video. They work in a similar way to straight needles, except they have a cable that joins them. These circular needles are 10mm. You need to make sure you're using the correct needle to make sure you have the desired outcome. If you are using a different yarn, check the needle size on the label. This will be by the gauge. So if the gauge, for example, says 12 stitches per 10 cm, see what needle size this is based on. If it's for 8mm, for example, use 8mm during this knit. Next, you'll need a large sewing needle. Make sure the eye of the needle is big enough to fit your yarn through. You'll need something to measure with. This can be a tape measure or a ruler. And finally, something to cut with. This can be scissors or snips. Now you have everything you need, let's get started. We're going to start by prepping the tassels. We do this first so we can get it out of the way, and then we don't have to worry about saving enough yarn at the end of the project. The finished tassels are going to be about 20 cm. We want to double this because they're on the fold, so measure down about 40 cm and cut the yarn. You can now use this piece as measurement for the rest of the tassels. Each tassel has about 2 pieces of yarn in, and you're going to need about 8 tassels, so you need to cut about 16 pieces of yarn. Once you have 16 pieces in one colour, you need to do exactly the same for the other. So you'll have 2 sets of 16 pieces, 40 cm long, in both colours. Once you have 16 pieces in one colour, you need to do exactly the same for the other. So you'll have 2 sets of 16 pieces, 40 cm long, in both colours. Once finished, put these strands to the side. You'll come back to these later. Time to start the scarf. Your scarf's going to be 25 cm wide. So measure 25 cm down your yarn and then times it by 3 by folding it. This marks how much yarn you'll need for your cast on. To start, you're going to need to make a slip knot. To do this, lay the yarn across your palm and wrap the yarn in a clockwise direction. Reach through the loop you created, keeping hold of the strand that was across your palm, and pull the other strand through. Pull till it makes a knot, but keep a loop big enough to put your needle through. Place your needle through the loop and pull the 2 yarns until the loop fits snug around your needle. I'm going to show you how to do that again. When you put the loop on the needle, the piece of yarn not attached to your ball should be facing towards you, and the piece attached to your ball to the back. Have your needle pointing to the left. We're now going to start doing a long tail cast on. With your pointing finger and thumb placed together, place them through the centre of the 2 legs of yarn, and then part them. Close your 3 other fingers around the 2 strands of yarn to hold them in place. Hold this position and pull the needle down so you make a V shape with the yarn. I'm going to show you how to do that again. This is your starting position for a long tail cast on. You are now going to start to cast on the correct number of stitches for this scarf. The stitch already on the needle from the slip knot will be your first stitch. You will be casting on a total of 25 stitches, so you need to cast on 24 more stitches. Keep hold of the stitch on your needle and place your needle from the bottom up on the yarn on the outside edge of your thumb. Now pull your needle towards your pointing finger. You're now going to go in from the back to the front of the piece of yarn on the inside edge of your pointing finger and pull this through the centre of the yarn around your thumb. Slip the yarn off your thumb but keep it on your pointing finger. Place your thumb back in the yarn to part it again and use this to pull the knot tightly. Now you're back into position to do your next stitch. You now have 2 stitches on your needle. We are now going to repeat that again. Move your needle to the outside edge of your thumb and place from bottom up. Move your needle over to the inside edge of your finger and place the needle from back to front and pull through the centre of your thumb. Now you can slip the yarn off your thumb and place your thumb back through the centre of the yarn to pull the stitch tight. Repeat this until you have 25 stitches on your needle. If you are using a different yarn, you may need to cast on a different amount of stitches. Once you have 25 stitches on the needle, you have finished casting on. I want to show you the difference between the right side of the work and the wrong side. If you look at the bottom of the row, you can see that they're all nicely slanting to the right. Now if you look at the bottom of the wrong side, you can see that there's little bumps instead. When you work in the flat, you work one row and then you turn the piece and you work back over. This is repeated for the whole piece, so you work a row, turn, work a row, turn, work a row. You will always be working from the right side to the left side of the stitches. So we're going to start by turning the piece and have your needle pointing to the right. Get rid of the ends not attached to the ball to the back of the work. You won't be using this anymore. You'll only be working with the piece of yarn attached to the ball. There are multiple different ways to knit. I'm going to show you a way that's called continental. I find it easier and quicker for me. You're more than welcome to try different ways. There is a full video on how to knit continental style on my YouTube. Start by placing your little finger from the back to the front of the yarn attached to the ball, and then turn your hand upwards. Then turn your hand so your palm faces the yarn. Open your pointing finger and place the yarn between. Turn your hand to grip the needle and slightly raise your pointing finger. I'm going to show you how to do that again. This is how you hold your yarn when you knit. The only thing that changes is you move your finger up and down. We are going to start to work our first row. Move your yarn to the back of the needle. Your first stitch is going to be a knit. Place your needle from front to back through the front leg of the first stitch. Raise your finger up and wrap the yarn around the needle in an anti-clockwise direction. Use a finger on your right hand to hold this piece of yarn in place. Now you're going to pull the needle with the yarn attached through the middle of the stitch towards you and slip the stitch on your left needle off, keeping the stitch on your right needle. Every time you do a knit, your yarn will be at the back. Next you're going to be doing a purl, so bring your yarn between the two needles through to the front. Start by having your left finger with the yarn on, pointing down. Your next stitch will be a purl. Place your needle from back to front through the front leg of your stitch on your left needle. Now raise this finger and wrap anti-clockwise around the needle. Return your finger to pointing down. This helps keep the yarn on the needle. Pull the needle with your yarn wrapped round, back through the centre of the stitch, and slip the left stitch off the needle, keeping the right one on. Now we're going back to a knit. Bring your yarn from the front of the work to the back. Place your needle from front to back through the front leg of the first stitch. Raise your finger up and wrap the yarn around the needle in an anti-clockwise direction. Use a finger on your right hand to hold this piece of yarn in place. Now you're going to pull the needle with the yarn attached through the middle of the stitch towards you, and slip the stitch on your left needle off, keeping the stitch on your right needle. The next stitch will be a purl, so bring the yarn back through the centre of the needles to the front. Start by having your left finger with the yarn on, pointing down. Place your needle from back to front through the front leg of your stitch on your left needle. Now raise this finger and wrap anti-clockwise around the needle. Return your finger to pointing down. Pull the needle with your yarn wrapped round, back through the centre of the stitch, and slip the left stitch off the needle, keeping the right one on. This is the full repeat for this row. So knit one, purl one, and repeat till the end of the row. You should end on a knit one. If this is your first time doing any knitting, I recommend trying my Learn How to Knit Continental Knit and Purl video on YouTube. In this video, there's a slower breakdown of how to knit. Once you've got the hang of knitting, it'll take you on to purl, so you can do them both separately before alternating. If you lose track of whether you should be doing a knit or a purl next, have a look at the stitches you've already done. If you look at the stitch I've just worked, you can see that there's sort of a loop right under the stitch that's on the needle. If you look at the stitch next to it, you can kind of see a bump, kind of like a horizontal knot just under the stitch on the needle. This is a purl bump. The knits are more of an open hole, kind of making a V shape, whereas the purls make a solid bump. Once you've finished your row, have a look at the work you've done. Your work should have an even repeat of the bumps from the pearls and the V's from the knits, alternating each time. Because we're working this scarf in the flat, you need to turn your work over so that the needle with all the stitches on is pointing to the right. The second row is similar to the first row, as it's still the same repeat of knits and purls. If you look under this first stitch, you can see there's a purl bump. That means we're going to do a purl here. So where you have a purl on the previous row, you'll be doing another purl, and when there's a knit on the previous row, you'll be doing another knit. So starting with purl, purl 1, then knit 1, and repeat this till the end of the row. Your last stitch should be a purl 1. Once you've done a few stitches, you can have a look to see the pattern forming. Your work should look a bit like this, with a row of V's and a row of bumps. And that's your second row done. It kind of looks a bit like a rib stitch at the moment. Now turn over the piece to work the other side. This will be your third row. The third row is similar to the first two. You'll be alternating purls and knits. This row is slightly different though. As before, we will put in knits on top of knits and purls on top of purls. This time we're going to alternate. So if you've got a knit below, you're going to do a purl on top. My first stitch is a knit here, so I'm going to start with a purl. So my repeat is going to be purl 1, knit 1, and repeat to the end of the row. Your last row should be a purl 1. Once you've done a few stitches, you can have a look to see the pattern forming. Your piece should look like mine. Your nice rows of knits and purls have now been interrupted. Your third row is now complete. There's 4 rows in total to this repeat, so your next row is your last. As you can start to see, a really yummy texture is forming. Now turn over the piece to work your next row. This is going to be your 4th row. This row is similar to the second row, where you work exactly the same stitch as shows below. So here my first stitch on the needle is a knit, therefore I'm going to start with a knit. The repeat for this row is knit 1, purl 1, and repeat to the end of the row. Your last stitch should be a knit 1. And that's it, all 4 rows of the repeat. You can see we have 2 rows of knit and then 2 rows of purl. Now turn the work, we're going to start row 1 again. Row 1 works similar to row 3, where you do the opposite to what stitch is below. My first stitch on the needle here is a purl 1, so I'm going to do a knit 1, purl 1 till the end of the row, and my last stitch will be a knit 1. Now just keep repeating rows 1 to 4 until you run out of your first ball of yarn. If you realise you've done something wrong a few stitches back, I'm going to show you how to unpick. This is called frogging. Look at the stitch below the stitch on your needle. This is where your tail of yarn is coming out from. Place your needle through the centre of this stitch. Now slip your stitch off the right needle and pull your yarn, so this pulls it out of the centre of the stitch that's now on your left needle. Unpick this for as many stitches as you need until you have unpicked the first stitch that you did wrong. Your scarf should be becoming squishy goodness. I'm going to show you now how to change the ball of yarn when you've finished yours. I forgot to film when I changed to my second ball of my first colour, but this works exactly the same way as it does when you change to your second colour. If possible, try and change colour at the very end of the row. Grab the tail from the ball you want to change to. Grab the end of your new ball with the tail of your old and hold it in your right hand. Now wrap your new yarn in your left hand as if you're going to work with it. Now simply work with it as you usually would. If your next stitch is a purl, then purl with it. If your next stitch is a knit, then knit with it. As long as you've left a tail in your hand of at least 15 centimetres, then it's not going to unravel. If you are worried, you can always knot the end of your new ball and your old ball together at the side. This is where I changed my first ball earlier. I'll knot it here for you to see. Once you've finished all your colour 1 and nearly all of your colour 2, we're going to cast off. Make sure you've got about 1 metre left of colour 2. When you're casting off, make sure you carry on working in pattern. So if your next stitch would be a knit 1 purl 1, then do a knit 1 purl 1. Work the first 2 stitches. Place your left needle into the second stitch on your right needle. Now pull the stitch over the top of the stitch next to it. This is called a cast off. Now work the next stitch in pattern. And repeat again, pulling the second stitch over the top of the stitch next to it. Repeat this for the whole row until you only have 1 stitch left on your right needle. When you've only got 1 stitch left on your right needle, cut the yarn leaving about a 20 cm tail. Pull out the stitch to make it a big loop and pull the tail through the middle. Pull the yarn to tighten the loop till it closes. And that's it, you've now finished the main body of the scarf. time to weave in the ends. This is mine and a lot of people's least favourite part. Undo the knot at the side if you made one earlier. Thread one of the ends through the needle. To sew in the ends, you're going to follow the shape of the stitches. So you're basically going to be sewing on top of the stitch and following it across the row. Follow the tail that you've got in your needle and see where it goes. It will be making like a squiggle mark, but weaving in and out of other stitches. Try and match a similar tension to what your stitch is. If it's too tight, it might pucker. Once you're a few stitches in, you can cut the yarn. My yarn I left here is a little short, so it's a little bit fiddly to do. Repeat this for all the ends in your scarf. I've actually left the ones on the cast on edge, because I'm going to use this within my tassel. It's tassel time. Pull over the 2 piles of tassels you cut earlier. There are different ways you can do your tassels. You can do them like mine, where the light pink side has only light pink. You can also have it mixed, so you have 1 strand of light pink and 1 strand of dark pink, or you can just completely alternate them, play around how you like. Each tassel will be 2 strands thick, so fold these 2 strands together in half and find one of the edge holes of your scarf. Push the 2 strands at the fold through the hole and pull it partway through. Open the loop and pull the 4 threads through the centre. Pull this tightly to close. I'm going to show you a few different ways you can lay them out. This is it with an all pink, this is it with 2 strands of different colours, and here's the contrast. On each end of the scarf you're going to have 8 tassels, so I start by placing 1 at each corner. I use the tail of my cast off within my tassel. This is just so that there's a few less ends for me to tie in at the end. Just thread your end in to lay with the rest of the loose threads from your tassel, and then cut it to size. I then fold the piece in half to find the middle point, and evenly space out 4 tassels in total, 3 more, in each half. Once you have all 8 tassels on one end, just do exactly the same on the other. And there you have it, your finished scarf. If you finish this tutorial, let me know how you found it in the comments and give me a subscribe.